Hello, and welcome to another ArtistWorks Instructor Spotlight. My name is Marcus, and today we're going to be joined by the amazing Tony Trischka. He's been teaching at ArtistWorks since 2009, if you can believe that. And Tony's topic for this week is the bedrocks of banjo. So check out our YouTube channel here. We posted mini lessons every day of the week. Bunch of great stuff there, really great ideas and some exercises, practical approaches to try out, and even some accompanying tablature too. So that was courtesy of Tony. We're going to be taking your questions in this show as well. So if you have any questions for Tony, just go ahead and drop them right in the comments, and we're going to get to as many as we can in the second half of the show. And also, we love to hear where you're joining us from today. So give us a little shout in the comments and say hi. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if this is the first time you're joining us here, we do these kind of shows here all the time on ArtistWorks. So please like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll keep you up to date as we go forward. So without further ado, please welcome Tony.
Hi, Marcus. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Tony. Great to see you.
Great to be back here, and wonderful to be doing ArtistWorks for all these years. And I think I've learned as much as I've taught in that time. And one thing, I'd like to start playing a tune that most of you banjo players know, Cripple Creek. And I was fortunate enough to come get a hold of a thumb drive with over 200 tunes of Earl Scruggs and John Hartford jamming, where they came up with obscure tunes that they'd never recorded before. They did Here Comes the Bride just in a jam session, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes adding a bass player, sometimes you can hear Tony Rice or Sam Bush or Del McCurry or Mac Wiseman joining in. And amongst the gems there, besides obscure stuff we'd never heard them do before, they did Cripple Creek. And Earl did some things there that we've never heard him do before, and it just kind of indicates that, you know, once something is on a record, or once you learn something from tablature, you know that one way to play it. But there's so many different ways to play. There are an infinite number of ways of playing a tune. So I'm going to play Cripple Creek pretty much note for note the way Earl played it in this jam session. It goes like this. There's so much information in there. For one thing, the way he recorded originally on Foggy Mountain Banjo, he went, and here instead of going, he went, and there are multiple versions of these tunes in these jam sessions. He just stayed up here at the 5th fret, and then he did this. And I'm thinking, what is this? This is crazy. It's easy to play. You just 5th string and then the 1st string 2nd fret and let go each time. And that's a little tip that's good to think about is, and I'll continue with Cripple Creek in a minute, but the idea of, even though you're on that 2nd fret multiple times, I call that left-hand separation of notes. By keeping it down, that note rings across the 5th string, keeps ringing, and you have less clarity. By letting go each time, you get a lot more clarity, and every note has its own place. Left-hand separation of notes. If you're into the melodic style, you play a tune like Devil's Dream. If you do this, if you keep that 2nd string 7th fret down, get that discord. So by letting go each time, instead of keeping it down, and it kind of obscures the other notes a little bit. So that's just something to think about even if you're just going to keep coming back to that same note over and over again, sometimes it's better just to let go each time to get a little more clarity. Anyway, that's called left-hand separation of notes. Another thing, going back to Cripple Creek, he did this. I almost fell over when I heard this. He went. This is not a blues tune. Cripple Creek is a fiddle tune. It's not a blues tune. And yet he would do this. And there's that flatted seventh, that first string third fret. It's an F note, which is the seventh. And then he has the index next to it on the second string, third fret. And he does this series of backward rolls. And he keeps going back and forth between the third fret first string and first string fifth fret. I'm using the pinky to get to that first string fifth fret, and I'm pretty sure that's how we fingered it. Anytime Earl was playing two strings at the same fret, anytime I saw him in person or in a video, he would always use the index and middle instead of the ring and middle and ring. So anyway, so this is a crazy blues thing he's doing in Cripple Creek. And again, it's highly syncopated, and syncopation exists when you accent certain notes that you don't expect to be accented. You expect the downbeat to be accented and maybe a little less so the upbeat. But this is, these are groupings of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the accent is falling sometimes on the downbeat, sometimes on the upbeat, sometimes in between both. So it's a varying thing. And I once was talking to Earl. I was friendly with him in his later years, and I didn't even ask him this question, but he volunteered and he said, yeah, I think what I brought to the banjo was syncopation. And he really did. He really brought syncopation. Again, all these accents that were unusual, and he didn't invent the three-finger style. Other people were doing it before him at the turn of the century, and the classic banjo style is what we call it today in the 1900s. And as early as for sure 1870s, there are books where there were three-finger style tunes that are there, and I'm sure people were doing it before then. Enslaved people were undoubtedly using 2- and 3-finger styles with their gourd bonzes, but Earl just took it to a whole other level. So that's a little bit of what he did in Cripple Creek, and interestingly, with all these backward rolls, he did something very similar on Farewell Blues. He went, which he recorded in 1949 on Mercury Records. So that's Farewell Blues, 1949, Mercury Records, when he had just recently left Bill Monroe and was playing with Lester Flatt. They just started the Foggy Mountain Boys. And here he is in his 20s, probably, maybe later 20s, and he came up with this. He's in the key of C, and he's hitting this note up here, which is a half step above C, very discordant. But it's all backward rolls, as is this bluesy thing from Cripple Creek. He's doing it up here. And that ending, he did a lot of this damping the fifth string with the heel of his palm, as I'm pretty sure he did it here. Alternating the fifth string and the first string. And I even saw him do this in the video one time. That standard ending, he damped the fifth string. It's just there's so many little tricks and amazing things that Earl did. I once asked him about Foggy Mountain Breakdown. And I said, why did you bring the thumb over to the second string when you played that? Index, thumb. Instead of going index, index, he said it felt better, which many of you and many of myself, and I know I've talked to Bela about this, and Noam Bikelny, going back and forth between these two fingers at fast speeds can be a little awkward. So by bringing the thumb across, it makes it easier. I think maybe that's what Earl was saying. He also said he liked the tonal difference between the index and the thumb, because the index is closer to the bridge. He said the way my hand falls, meaning he, Earl. The index is closer to the bridge, so it has a little more of an edge. The thumb is farther out. It has a more mellow sound. And that just amazed me that it's this tempo. That those tonal differences made a difference to him. Plus, it's a metal pick and a plastic pick. So he was a really deep guy. So continuing, the most important thing in any music is timing. You want to have good timing, and working with a metronome is a great way to do that. There are other ways. What Earl would do, and I mentioned this, I think, in one of the videos this week, what he would do with his brother Horace. Horace would play the guitar. This is when Earl was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. In Flint Hill, North Carolina, they would stand in front of their house and walk around both opposite sides of the house till they got playing Sally Gooden, this fiddle tune Sally Gooden. When they got to the back, they would see if they're still in time with each other. And if they were, then that's how they worked on their time. If not, they'd go back and start over again back in the beginning. So he'd be playing Sally Gooden like this. And here again, I was mentioning if he's on this two strings at the same fret, he would use the index and middle. And I saw him do this live at a rehearsal with the Chieftains, and he went, and when he was doing this B part of Sally Gooden, he had the index on the second string 12th fret, middle on the first string 12th fret. So, and this position here, which Earl used a lot. And he does these tunes like Chicken Reel and things like that, again, that he never recorded, and he does that in the jam sessions out of this position. And I asked him once, where did you get that position? And he said he didn't remember, but I had a chance to interview Snuffy Jenkins, who came before Earl, and he used that position himself. And he said he got it from a guy named Smith Hammett, who lived around Flint Hill, North Carolina. I played a small banjo, and this was when Earl was a kid. He would have seen Smith Hammett play. But and so that's maybe where that position came from the 20s and the 30s. Anyway, but timing is everything, as John Hartford once said, and so really work on your timing no matter what. And what John once said was, what he would do, and he learned this from Buddy Emmons, the Earl Scruggs of the pedal steel guitar, play really slow tempos with a metronome. Because it can be really hard to have that click going and being really locked in. And I like doing 2 notes per click. In fact, I have this right here. So maybe I'll just, if you can hear this, that's at 89 randomly. 1, 2, 1, 2. I have 2 notes per click. You could play even slower than that. And then you could just, instead of doing 2 notes per click, you could do 4 notes per click. Maybe, I don't know, at 121, let's say. That's not even crazy fast. That's Cripple Creek at 150. So anyway, that's something to think about. And in terms of building up speed, which a lot of people have questions about, building up speed, one thing I realized at some point, if rather than trying to play a whole tune really fast, just play one measure of the tune or just some rolls. Most people can move their hands really quickly like that. You can try it at home. Just moving your fingers really quickly, just doing forward rolls or whatever's comfortable for you. But I think playing an entire tune that way can be fairly daunting. But just try that, and you can try some just free improvisation. Just put your fingers anywhere on the fingerboard and move the fingers around. You know, here's an F chord. Here's G, A, B flat. I just randomly put my fingers here, but with an open first string. a grouping of forward rolls. Thumb on the fourth, index on the second, middle on the first. Then third, second, first, then fifth, second, first, third, second, first. So the thumb goes from the fourth to the third to the fifth, third, fourth. And just move positions around. And free improvising is a great way to start getting into improvisation. I should also mention there's something called a sound corset in terms of building up speed. It's an app in your phone, and you can record things and slow them down to half speed. It's got that in there, so it's got a regular metronome. You can also, it has a place in there where you can have two metronomes. You can set them at two tempos, one a slower tempo where you're comfortable playing, and then you can set the second metronome at a slightly higher tempo, and then you can vary the distance between those two tempos, but it will gradually speed up. It's a metronome that will speed up from the original tempo going to the faster tempo, and will bring you along with it. So that's another way to build up your speed, the sound corset. So in terms of improvising, I'm not sure how many of you folks out there are improvising, but free improvisation is a nice way to go with it. It doesn't matter where your fingers go, just go anywhere. And just do any kind of rhythmic thing you want to do, or just play one note on the third string, and go down, Just noodle around. And so one way to improvise, and you don't even change notes, but play something you know how to play, like Cumberland Gap. And I'm playing pretty close to the bridge because it's bluegrass and it's a strong tune, and I really want to punch it out there. But you could also play it like this. So I was playing it really softly away from the bridge, so it's getting, a sweeter, prettier sound. But the last note I went really strong. That's an improvisation. That sounds kind of silly, but just changing that sort of a sound. And I saw an interview with Ornette Coleman once where we talked about that. And symphonies do that all the time. They play the same music, but different conductors will have different approaches. Okay, this passage is going to be mezzo forte, really loud, or we'll make it pianissimo, we'll make it really quiet. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is just play a scale. You can even just go up on one string if you don't know how to do the scale, but you can go 0-2 on the third, 0-1 on the second, 0-2, 4-5 on the first, and you can do it more slowly than that, but just mess around with just those notes. And I'm doing something in the single string style here. Well, anyway, before I get to that, in terms of improvising, there's also just throwing in different licks, which is something one of the many things Earl would do in improvisation. So you would have this like, and rather than just hitting the first string with that lick, if you know that lick, which is how I first learned it in my very first banjo lesson, Earl would put his middle finger on the second string, third fret, and hit two notes at the same time. So if you're playing something like 9-pound hammer, so you can go and get that note there. Earl would also go just staying on the third fret rather than going to that note. Or one of my favorite licks of all time is from a guy named Peter Schwimmer out in Oregon. And it's a D lick, and it's got contrary motion as opposed to, and then going. And it's really strong because it's all forward rolls. But there's so many, there's this. There are an infinite number of D licks, as there are an infinite number of C licks. And so even if you're just changing one note, you don't feel like you have to improvise to an entire tune. Just take one little C lick. And as I mentioned in one of the videos I did for you folks, Earl would do this lick. All backward rolls. The C7th, here's your barred C, first string 8th fret. Pinky on the first string 8th fret, index on the second string 5th fret, and all backward rolls. Or he would do all forward rolls. Or my favorite. Backward, backward, forward, backward, backward. And it's a highly syncopated tune. So those are three different ways of playing that one position, and you're not even jumping all over the fingerboard. So one thing I wanted to talk about was single string style. Wherein you're basically playing melodies as opposed to chords, and in the right hand it's almost always thumb, index, 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 thumb. And it's just a cool way to get around the fingerboard. Don Reno was the master of the single string style. A guy named Eddie Adcock, who was with the original country gentleman, who unfortunately who passed very recently, was he told me that he was doing all single string style, and then he showed Don Reno how to do it. Don Reno was just doing small licks, but he got Don Reno into doing full single string styles. And this is a Don Reno tune called Follow the Leader, where he did this. Taking that position, moving it down 2 frets, then one more. And one trick about doing single string, when you're on lower strings, like on the 4th string, rather than staying in the same position, you're coming under the string much more than hitting it flat on at a right angle. So if you move your hand back this way just a little bit on the lower strings, it'll be a little bit easier to get a good sound. And a little cleaner. There's a Celtic tune called The Blackbird, which I learned in Ireland from a guy named Barney McKenna. Wonderful. He kind of brought the banjo to Ireland. He was in a group called the Dubliners, and he showed me this tune. And the A part goes like this. With these triplets on the 4th string are a little bit tricky to get. But if you bring your hand back this way, again, watch my hand as I go back and forth, getting down to the 4th string. So you're moving your hand around like this. At least this is something that really works for me. It's something you can try. The ultimate single string thing is to do everything just on one string. And a while back I started doing that, and I wrote 5 tunes, one for each string of the banjo. And as I would joke, actually, I got nervous about breaking strings. So I figured if I have a tune on every string, if I break a string, I can play a tune on another string that's not broken. And I'll play you a tune that's called the 3rd string, and it goes like this. Sorry. String, the entire thing. Which brings up a whole other topic of composing tunes. And many times here at ArtistWorks, I will suggest people that they write their own tunes. I'll give them an exercise, have them play the interval of the third. And ask them to write a tune using thirds. Bill Emerson wrote a tune called Theme Time, and the B part goes. Those are all thirds. I started getting into the interval of the seventh lately. And Aaron Copland, my favorite composer, would do sevenths at various times. So here's a 1/7 interval between these two notes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this one: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's really pretty, and so I wrote a tune using these, which I'll play for you right now, and go into another tune right after that I wrote recently. Once again, let me start again. So for these chords, these are positions that Sonny Osborne of the Osborne Brothers, one of my favorite people in the world, who passed a couple of years ago, and he would use that position at various times in slow songs. So here's G. If you take the bar position of the G and play the first and third strings out of that, then take the low string from the next lower inversion of G, which is your D position G here, and take that note from that next lower position, you get this, or this position here. Here's your D position G. Take the first and third strings from that position, 9th fret of the first string, 7th fret of the third, and catch that with the pinky and middle, and then take the low string from your next lower inversion, your F position G, and you've got this here. And these passing chords. You can do all sorts of amazing things with those chords. I should also talk about the melodic style a little bit. The melodic style is a style based on scales instead of chords. Scruggs style is mostly a chordal kind of a thing. Like Fireball Mail. The melody is here, but you've got this note and this note, where the melody is sort of carrying through there. So there are many notes that are not actually in the melody, whereas in the melodic style, every note is a melody note, and you go to a lower string to get a higher note. Open third string, fourth string, 7th fret, open second, middle and the third string, 5th fret, open first, middle and the second string, 5th fret, pinky, index on the first string, 4th fret. So you're going to a lower string, to get a higher note. It's counterintuitive. And the person that brought this to us really in a wide-scale way is Bill Keith, William Bradford Keith, who was the first Northern guy to go down and play with Bill Monroe back in March of 1963. And the tune that he really brought to the world in this style was called Devil's Dream, a fiddle tune from the British Isles. That's one of his endings. Anyway, so this opened up all sorts of new possibilities for playing the banjo. Suddenly, there's a whole new style. Now, Bill Keith wasn't the first person to do that. There's a person before him named Bobby Thompson. If you ever saw the great show, the great cultural touchstone of American culture, Hee Haw, the theme song from that was played by Bobby Thompson. This crazy, all this blues. All that blues stuff was right there on Hee Haw. And by the way, here's a blues scale. You just play where if you have an inlay on the first fret, forget that. We go 0, next inlay at the 3rd fret, 5th, 7th, 10, 12, 15, 17, 19, way up there. And that's a blues scale. If you ever want to figure out how to play a blues scale, it's right there on your banjo. It's like Dorothy's Ruby Slivers, she could always go home. The blues scale was always there. Anyway, Bobby Thompson was a great, great banjo player. And he did a lot of session work mostly. He played with the Monkees, but he was with Jim and Jesse in the 50s and played with them again later around 1964. But I'll play a tune. There's something called The Porch Tape, which you should all check out if you don't know about it. It's on YouTube, and it's Bill Keith going down to North Carolina to record Bobby Thompson. And mostly it's Bobby Thompson playing. Sometimes Bill Keith is joining in on double banjos on, I think they do Old Joe Clark or something like that. But I'll play one tune from that tape, The Porch Tape, and it's Camptown Races, not New Camptown Races, which Frank Wakefield wrote, but Camptown Races. And this is how Bobby Thompson played it. So he's mixing Scruggs and melodic. Scruggs, melodic, Scruggs, melodic. So he mixes, goes in and out of both. Now there's another guy named Carroll Best, who was a farmer in Western North Carolina, who I met at the Tennessee Banjo Institute in 1990 in Lebanon, Tennessee. And he never recorded commercially until right at the end of his life. But he had a chance to interview him for Banjo Newsletter, which unfortunately is no longer with us. And I said, when did you start playing the melodic style? He called it the fiddle style. He said 1945. And Bobby Thompson was doing it around 1955, and Bill Keith maybe around 1960, 61. But here's a guy doing it in 1945. And he said he would play these square dances with a fiddle player and a guitar player. And one time the fiddle player said, I can't make it next week. You're going to have to learn how to play the fiddle tunes on the banjo. So he just did it in a week, figured out a bunch of fiddle tunes using what we today call the melodic style, but he called it the fiddle style. And I said, what was the first tune you played in that style in 1945? He said, Crippler Creek. And he went, instead of going, he went, and that's a completely melodic style, and that was 1945. And then I said, did you ever play Devil's Dream? And he said, yeah, around 1949. And he went, and here he is playing Devil's Dream, very similar to the way Bill Keith would do it 10 or 11 years later. So anyway, I've been spieling for a while, and I'd like to invite Marcus Luscombe, my dear friend and a wonderful, wonderful guy at ArtistWorks, who saves me when I get technologically challenged, which comes up once in a while, and he's there to save my day. So welcome back, Marcus.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. That was fantastic. Really great stuff. We've got a couple questions that came in. I'd like to encourage everyone that's here, if you have any questions for Tony, just drop them in the comments. We'll get to as many as we can. I saw one that I'll pull out as the first one, just to give a shout out to the Alaskan Sunnyside Sisters.
Oh, of course, yes.
Students, we've been all really enjoying your VE submissions. Salima,
So great, so great.
really cool. Yeah, Salima's asking if you wouldn't mind playing some Foggy Mountain Breakdown for us.
Foggy Mountain Breakdown. I wouldn't mind playing that at all. Let's see. Here we go. Sure was fun to play.
Thanks for that. What a treat. Awesome. All right.
I think I just lost Marcus here. I'm not sure if you folks are still out there, but
Can you hear me there, Tony?
there, yeah, yep. Are we all
Cool,
here?
yeah. Thanks for bearing with us. Yeah, just sometimes the internet makes this technology a little clunky, but we'll do our best here. So next up, we've got a question from longtime ArtistWorks student, Miss Julie Colton.
Wow, Julie, how are you out there?
And she asks if you could just talk a little bit about the origins of bluegrass, some of its most important developments and contributors. And as such a historian of the instrument, I think this is right up your wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, Bill Monroe was the father of bluegrass music, and he took, people would say, well, you got to play traditional bluegrass the way Bill Monroe did it in 1945 with Flatt and Scruggs. But Bill Monroe was a real innovator. He started out playing with his brother Charlie Monroe in, I think, kind of the mid-30s, and recorded, I think, for the Bluebird label. And they were very popular, just the two of them. There were a lot of brother acts in those days. And so that's how he cut his teeth, as it were. But when Bill was growing up, and they were doing country music and some gospel tunes and this sort of thing. And also, Bill Monroe grew up in Rosine, Kentucky, and was born September 13th, 1911. And when he was a kid, there was a African-American street singer and guitar player and fiddler named Arnold Schultz. And he played the blues, and that's apparently where Bill Monroe credits him with giving him the blues. And also, Bill Monroe lost both of his parents at a very young age, and Earl lost his father when Earl was 4 years old. So there was this kind of tragedy in both of their lives. So Bill Monroe, in part, was raised by his Uncle Pen Vanover, who is a wonderful fiddle player, and the tune Uncle Pen is named for him. So Uncle Pen would take Bill Monroe to fiddle contests and this sort of thing, and that's where the fiddle aspect of bluegrass comes in. And again, the gospel thing was something he was doing with his brother Charlie. So you get gospel, you got the fiddle tunes, you've got just general country music. Jimmy Rogers, who recorded in 1928 in Virginia for Ralph Peer, did all these blue yodel numbers, including Mule Skinner Blues, which became a standard for Bill Monroe. So he took some of the Jimmy Rogers material and added that. So it was a compilation of all these different things. And even in the 40s, he had an accordion player named Sally Forrester, whose real name was Wilhelmina Forrester. But he had that. He had an accordion. He had someone playing sort of offbeats on the guitar, almost sounded like a swing band. And in the 40s, he had a 4-string banjo player playing with him also, a couple of 4-string banjo players. He was trying to get the sound together, but he started on the Opry in 1939, I believe it was, 38 or 39. And it was banjo, fiddle, not banjo, it was mandolin, fiddle, guitar, and bass. And Monroe was playing mandolin because his brother Charlie played guitar, and his brother Birch played fiddle, and they were the older ones, so the only instrument lying around the house left was the mandolin, and that's why Bill Monroe took up the mandolin. And John Hartford once said that Bill Monroe was the greatest fiddle tune player ever on the mandolin. And if you listen to any of his fiddle tunes, if you slow it down to half speed, he's doing some amazing stuff. Anyway, in 1945, maybe even 44, Lester Flatt joined the band, and in October of 45, Earl Scruggs joined the band. And that's when it became bluegrass as we know it today, with that Scruggs-style banjo. And Monroe would be on the Grand Ole Opry, and he'd be introduced by old Judge Hay. Now here's Earl Scruggs with that fancy banjo playing, and now Earl, you get Brother Bill there, and let's go. And he's talking more about Earl Scruggs than Bill Monroe, and Monroe would let Earl take solos on take every solo in a tune, not every tune, but on some tunes. Earl takes every solo because the audience is going nuts for this new style of banjo playing that Earl himself considered to be Scruggs style. Anyway, that's my thumbnail, maybe slightly larger than thumbnail sketch of the history of bluegrass.
Very nice. Cool. Yeah, I think that's a deep rabbit hole to go down, but thanks for that. Cool. Yeah, keep the questions coming, folks. There's some great ones here. Let's just go in order here. So next up is from Eric, who says, you're a huge advocate of Earl Scruggs, but your own style was considered alternative. How do you compose an early tunes like Jesse's Girl?
Wow, Jesse's Girl. Boy, you're really throwing me a curveball there. Let's see. Well, I was listening to a lot of, I grew up in the 60s and, was listening to the Beatles and Frank Zappa and Van Dyke Parks and the Beach Boys doing their more experimental things, and Hendrix, everybody, and everything was changing. Music was really changing a lot. And so I had all those influences, and I was listening in the early 70s, I was listening to a lot of jazz and fusion music like Chick Corea and Mahavishnu Orchestra and Weather Report. And so all that stuff was getting into my fingers, into my head. Now, Jesse's Girl, I don't remember how to play that. It's too involved, but I played out of it. It's interesting because there was a guy named Doc Boggs who played out of this tuning sometimes. So it's an innovative sort of a tune, but it's coming out of a very traditional background. Doc Boggs did a tune, he did Pretty Polly in 1928. So I took that tuning where you take the G tuning, second string goes from B down to A, the fifth string goes from G to F sharp. You get this really lonesome sound, but he also would play out of this tuning with the fourth string down to C. I'm not going to take the time to get totally in tune. And that's the tuning I used to write Jesse's Girl, but it had a much different cast to it than that. And that's one thing I would do. I just get into different tunings because I was getting tired of G tuning. Not that there aren't infinite things you can do in G tuning, but just to get different ideas going, I would get into different tunings. And that appears, I think, it's on my second album, Heartlands, which came out in 1975 or thereabouts. And I have an album called The Early Years. You can find it in the streaming services. My first two albums, Bluegrass Light and Jesse's Girl, are on there. And on my first album, I was listening to a guy named, before I recorded it, I was listening to a guy named Don Ellis, who was a big band leader, and he played in these different time signatures. So I was listening to that all night one night and woke up the next morning and wrote a tune called The Jig Is Up, which is on my first album, which is in 7/4 time. Sorry, get a little more in tune. 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it goes on from there like that. And then these jazzier chords. So that's one of the, I guess, more innovative things that I came up with. That was around 1972 or something like that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
fantastic. Great song.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Here's one from Joshua, and I'll just kind of summarize here. But basically, he's working in first and in root position and first inversion, and he's having a little bit of difficulty remembering the name of the chords as he switches between positions. Any tips for that?
So first inversion, like G, C, D, like that, and then second position, G, C, D, and then up to the third position.
Sounds like he's remembering the fingerings, but just trying to remember which chord he's in. Is there any sort of shortcuts you have to remember, like where you are when you memorize a shape, knowing what chord it is?
Right. Well, one way to think about it is, you think of, I use the term the bar FD. There was when I was growing up, there was a cowboy named Roy Rogers. He was really big, and all these cowboys had ranches, and so the bar FD ranch was the ranch that I made up to remember things. So you start with your bar position. There's the bar, and then the F position, and then the D position, and those are the three basic inversions. The bar, which is basically open, but it's as if you're barring, and then here's your F position, G, and your D position, G. Now I'm moving into three different inversions, I know that. So if you get used to the bar, F, D, those three positions, that's, one way to remember that. Now, the C chord, that's a D position, really. It's as if the index is behind the nut here. I'm embarrassed to say it took me many years to realize this, but it's basically your D chord position. So it's bar F, D, and here we're starting on D. So you go bar F, D, and then repeat bar F, D. So in this case, rather than starting with the bar F, D for the G, it's bar F, D, and the bar at the 5th fret, and then the D position. I'm sorry. Here's a D position, and then the bar, and then F position up here between the 8th and 10th frets, and the same thing with the D chord. Here's your D position, bar F, D, and then bar F, D. Now, maybe this is too confusing. Otherwise, I can say that here's your G chord here. Now, when you get here, these last three strings, first, second, and third strings, are the first three strings of this bar position. No, I'm sorry, I'm saying bar position, F position. The next inversion is, here's G, and here's your F position, G, your F chord on 2 frets. So the first three strings are G, B, and D, and those same notes are here on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. So that's one way the notes are the same. And for C, the same thing. The first three strings, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, take the bar, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, they're the same notes. And for the D chord, 3rd, 2nd, 1st strings, and the bar at the 7th fret, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, those are the same notes. So if that helps at all, those are some ideas about trying to keep the chord name straight.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. We've got a couple questions here now, just talking about sort of pressure in the right and left hand. So I'll put the two of these out here for you before you jump in. But here's the first one from CB. Hi, Tony. Enjoying the music from Spain. Question, when you speed up the right hand, do you lighten the touch? Also the left hand. Playing hard seems to impede the speed. And then secondarily, we've got one here from Monkira that says, I seem to grip and wrap my left hand too much, whereas your left hand seems relaxed. How do you get the pressure on the strings?
Practice, years of practice. I know it's counterintuitive when you're trying to play faster. There's this tendency to add tension in your right hand. And really, if you want to play fast, it's better to play much more lightly. Now, if I'm playing really hard, I've been playing long enough that I can play hard and play at fast tempos usually, but I find sometimes I do solo shows and I'll play Foggy Mountain Breakdown and I'll be hitting so hard that I'm not playing cleanly because I'm just hitting it hard. And there are times when that does become a problem. So yes, definitely it's much more to your advantage to play lightly. And it's tricky because that tendency is, I gotta play hard, I gotta play fast, I gotta really dig in. And again, the opposite is the case. I was sitting in with a group called the Dry Branch Fire Squad many years ago. Their banjo player was getting married and he couldn't make it, so I was asked to sit in with this band. And I wasn't playing real fast bluegrass at that point. I was doing all sorts of different things, but I wasn't playing killer fast. And I just before I walked on stage, I asked the guy who was running, whose band it was, Ron Thomason. I said, "So, can we rehearse these tunes?" And he said, "No, we don't rehearse." And that's just before we walked on stage. I said, "So I asked the guitar player, what's the repertoire? What are we doing?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. Ron just calls it out." So it was like really flying by the seat of my pants. And the first tune was like really like that with no warm up. We didn't rehearse with the band. And it took me to the end of the first set to be comfortable playing really fast. And I finally got warmed up to it. So it's something you have to warm up to. Yes, the idea is playing more lightly will really help you in terms of speed.
Excellent. Cool. Here's one from Leon from San Juan Capistrano.
Wow.
Yes. Can you take a bluegrass classic with a standard position chords and show a few simple finger position changes you can use to vary the sound?
Wow, that's a good question. Let's see. Let's try, well, I'll do 9-Pound Hammer again. Now, instead of playing a regular C chord, I have the open first string, which gives you the added 9th note. Do, re, mi, fa. Well, I don't have the low C note, but that's the 9th note of the scale D, or the 2nd note. And that's really pretty. Instead of playing a D, I'm just doing that lick. But another way to do a C is, here's a C chord with an open first string and add the pinky on the 3rd string, 3rd fret. And that'll give you a 9th chord. I won't take the time to describe it, but when you have the 9th note of the scale plus the flatted 7th, that gives you a 9th chord. And to do this chord, it's nice to go, which I talk about in my school. You do a double forward roll, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, then 3rd, 2nd, 1st, twice. And it gives you 12 notes, and to get 16 notes, which will give you 2 measures, do an alternating thumb roll, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 1st. And that's a nice way to play a C chord, but fancier. And sometimes I'll take that and move that index up 1 fret. The C goes to a C sharp and just gives it this more angular sound, just like Earl was doing, but down here. You can do things like take the D chord, go down half step by barring at the 2nd fret, and then to the D7th. One thing that Bill Keith did is he brought the 9th chord to bluegrass. Here's a lick that he used to do. So here's your D7th, but then he would add the ring on the 1st string, 2nd fret. And going up to this note, you're going from the 1st note of the scale to the 2nd note of the scale, which is also the 9th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When you have the 9th note of the scale and the flatted 7th, which is right here, that C note, that gives you a D9th chord. So that's a more colorful way of playing a D7th. Here we go, 0, 2, 4th, 2nd, 1st. And And so if you go from D to C7th, it's the same idea. I'm taking part of a C7th with the index on the 2nd string, 1st fret, ring on the 3rd string, 3rd fret, and doing forward, backward rolls. Then add the middle on the 1st string, 2nd fret, and then the pinky on the 1st string, 3rd fret. And then the other thing that Bill Keith brought to us was the 9th chord in G. To get to a C chord, here's G7th, and here's the first note of the scale, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and back down. And right there's a G 9th chord, 1st string, 3rd fret, and the 9th note of the scale, which is the same as the 2nd, 3rd string, 2nd fret. And Bill Keith played a tune on an album by Red Allen and Frank Wakefield on Folkways Records called New Camptown Races, where he did that lick. When I first heard that, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It made Beethoven's Ninth Symphony sounded like, you know, something not nearly that good. Anyway, those are some ideas for that question.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thanks. And yeah, just so Leon and anyone else watching, if you want to go back and sort of revisit this video will be on the YouTube channel for eternity. So you can go back and use the speed controls to slow it down. Take your time getting inside of that. Great stuff, Tony.
Thank you.
So I think that's all the questions I've seen come in. So maybe we'll just take a moment, give you a chance to talk a little bit about your school. Can you, I think a lot of the people here are already your students. You've been teaching with us for about 16 years now. Your school is absolutely massive. At last look, you've got well over 12,300 video exchanges with students, which is just mind-boggling. That in addition to hundreds and hundreds of lessons, and I think there's 50, 60 full-length interviews with some of the best, even some of the people you mentioned earlier today, like Snuffy, Bela, Eddie Adcock, Noam Pikelny. Tell us a little bit about what folks can find in your lessons at ArtistWorks.
Well, the lessons at ArtistWorks, it starts from here's how you hold the banjo. I start with that. One thing I wanted to mention, a question earlier about my left hand. Make sure you're not palming the banjo. Some folks do this, and you're creating more friction when you do that. It's better to just let your hand kind of hang loose like this in a relaxed fashion. So I wanted to mention that. But anyway, that's one thing. Just here's how you hold the banjo. And then I have a little bit of speaking of Beethoven's famous Ninth Symphony, that's the Ode to Joy from that. And then I go into that. And then I do some simple alternating thumb rolls and get folks playing Boil Them Cabbage Down. And then, I mean, I could spend another 100 hours going through every lesson. I'm not doing that right now. But anyway, it starts absolute beginner, just strumming some chords as well. And then getting into more fancy stuff, doing some Scruggs style. I have Cripple Creek, the way Earl played it in 1945 on the Grand Ole Opry in a live show. Towards the end of the beginning lessons. Then there's the intermediate, and then there's advanced. And then I've got other aspects. I've got a whole clawhammer area done by a guy named Bob Carlin, who's a great clawhammer player. I do some clawhammer myself, but I had him do a, how to get started with clawhammer. And I've got lessons on Celtic music, old-time finger picking, including music by Doc Boggs. When I did that crazy tuning earlier, that was from Doc Boggs. So some tunes by Doc Boggs and Pete Seeger, some tunes by Pete Seeger because he was a great banjo player. People don't always recognize that. Anyway, just it's not all just bluegrass, but it's mostly bluegrass oriented. And I talk about melodic style. I get into great detail about that, and single string style. And then in the advanced lessons, I'd have some Noam Pikelny things, some Bela information. He does this thing that's really cool where you go. And you can move it all over the neck. And then a lot of my own ideas, including that double forward roll that you can move it around the neck. So anyway, that's what I have for the lessons. And again, as Marcus was mentioning, the video exchanges, you can send in a video to me and I respond to it, not in real time, but it goes into a queue, and then I respond to it from there. And as he was saying, I guess I have over 12,000. I don't know how I found the time to do that, but somehow I did. So please do. That's the most important thing. If you sign up for ArtistWorks, you'll get the most out of it if you do send a video in for me to critique, and I'm very nice about it. I don't get nasty or anything like that. And there's some very simple things that I can talk about. I didn't even mention this before, but separation of notes is something that a lot of people have trouble with. When you're playing, you want to have every note really clear. Lots of times people's first string are a little bit quiet. They'll go, and I can see they're hitting the first string, but a lot of times people are doing it like this. I don't even hear the first string, as opposed to. And that's a really important note. And so people can send in a video and I can immediately hear if they're having that as a problem, and I point it out to them, and then they can work on it. Or if their timing needs help, or whatever it is, or palming the banjo, I say, well, try not to do that. And so there are these very easily identifiable things that you might not be aware of. So, and again, as Marcus said, I've got over 50 interviews with Steve Martin's in there, and Allison Brown, and just all sorts of wonderful folks, because I have my point of view about teaching, but then let's get input from all these other people and how they feel about the banjo and what they can teach. So anyway, those are some of the things that are there.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And yeah, I will say, just from somebody that had never played banjo, I just decided to jump into your lessons, and now I enjoy playing banjo. I won't say that I'm any good, but it's been amazing. And I really came into it knowing nothing and never putting on a finger pick before joining. So yeah, it's really just a fantastic experience and such a great community of supportive pickers.
Yep.
It's awesome. So check it out if you haven't already. And thank you to everyone that's a part of that. We couldn't do it without you. And Tony, my goodness.
I just do want to mention, if you don't mind me interrupting, the community is a big aspect of this, because there's some people who have been here for entire 16 years, which is really amazing. And then some folks, just joined yesterday. But it is a community, and not infrequently people say, I've been away for a month and I just had back surgery or something, and then people just say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean, it's a very supportive community for people who are going through problems. They sometimes share that on the site, and we all get to kind of join together and send them support. Or if people are having trouble with their music, but it is a wonderful, wonderful community that we've got here. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, I was just going to sort of tee you up to talk about where can folks find more about what's going on in your world, like anything upcoming that you want to tell folks about?
Well, I'm doing a workshop in Sicilia, Italy, September 8th through 12th, and you can find out information about that on my website, tonytrischka.com. And it's going to be not just music, but great eating, and there's an old town there called Ortigia, which is in Syracuse. It's part of Syracuse. It's this old town, and it's mostly a pedestrian town, so you can go there, and the ocean's all around, and the food, and the banjo. And I'll be joined by a banjo player from up north in Genoa, named Silvio Ferretti, who plays with a group called Red Wine. He's a great banjo player, and he'll be my assistant teacher there. So please join us in Sicily. And then I have an Earl Jam album that came out last June, a year ago, and I'm finishing up the touches. In fact, I'm going to Nashville next Monday and Tuesday to record a couple more tunes to finish it off, and that'll be coming out at the beginning of next year. So those are, and then I've got this online banjo school called Tony Trischka School of Banjo for ArtistWorks. So that's, oh yeah, I guess everyone knows that already. That's why we're here. But anyway, those are some things that I'm working on.
Yeah, very cool. So check out, I just posted in the comments, so there's the link to the Sicily retreat, if anyone wants to check that out. And then also to your website where you've got all your calendar of upcoming shows. And it looks like you've got a stacked deck, all sorts of stuff coming up.
Yep, I'm keeping busy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Really,
Yeah,
really great stuff.
yeah. I was also asked to compose a piece, a 5-minute piece for a chamber group, which I'm in the midst of right now. So, getting into the classical world where I started when I was a kid, taking flute and piano lessons. So it's full circle.
Oh, that's great. Cool.
Keeps
Well,
it exciting.
thank you so much for joining us today, Tony. We love you around the shop, and we are very proud to have you as part of ArtistWorks. So thank you for everything you do for us,
Thank you,
and
Marcus, so
Banjo
much.
and the world at large. Really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And please join us next time. We'll be doing these frequently, so just visit us here on this channel, and you'll catch the next one.
Well, thank you, Marcus, and thank you everyone who tuned in here. I really appreciate you all, and we'll catch you the next time.
Cool. Take care, everyone.
So long, everybody.